meeting to order. I'd have the members, witnesses take their places. Order, please. I'd like to welcome and thank our witnesses for being here today. And with no further ado, we're going to turn it over to Via Rail for their presentation. 10 minutes or less, please. Mr. Del Bosco.
Monsieur le Président du Comité,
Mr. Chair, dear members, members of Parliament, on behalf of my colleagues at Via Rail Canada, I'm pleased to tell you about the progress that we are making and about our safety results.
Component of our operation, our passion for traveling by train and for the development of the rail passenger industry are intimately linked to our dedication to mitigating risk, improving our performance, and demonstrating to our clients and the public that train travel is reliable and the safest means of travel in Canada. In this regard, we have performed very well over the past 5 years. My colleague Jean will present an overview of our action plan related to safety. She'll be followed by Denis, to my right, who will explain how a strong safety culture and sound governance practices have become the foundation of what we do. Denis will also say a few words about our initiatives and investments that have contributed to improving our performance. Allow me first to say a few words about who we are and the particular operational environment in which we oversee safety. Almost 4 million passengers travel every year on board one of our trains across our 12,500 kilometers of network. We operate over 500 departures per week to hundreds of destinations through remote areas such as Churchill or Prince Rupert and in the popular Quebec-Windsor corridor. We also offer 2 long-distance trains that run east and west, the Ocean and the Canadian. Nos trains traversent 450 communautés.
Our trains go through 450 communities and carry passengers through tunnels and bridges to often very remote destinations.
Is particular for 2 reasons. First, because our network runs across the country's unique geography and changing landscape. Second, because 98% of the railroad we use is owned by the freight industry. Only 255 kilometers of the railway we roll on, located between Coteau and Smiths Falls, actually belongs to Via. We therefore have to mitigate the risks associated with our operations without owning the railroad on which we travel. We must share the responsibility for prevention, surveillance of track and risk management. Despite these challenges, train travel is safer today than it was when I started my career 36 years ago. I'll now welcome Jean Turney to come talk about some of the highlights of our safety programs.
Thank you. Good morning. So part of the basic principles of our safety management system is that it has helped us to develop and maintain a very good, strong safety culture. All of our employees contribute to our safety management system. Both the unionized and the management level are fully involved. It clearly identifies responsibilities and accountabilities for all safety leaders, so we know who does what, who's accountable. It promotes the safety, security, and health of all of our employees, our passengers, and the general public. It helps us to comply with all applicable laws and regulations, and even to exceed. And it provides us a framework for setting goals and targets for planning and measuring our safety performance. We have a structure that is headed off with corporate policies and SMS standards at an overview level, and then it works down into an annual corporate safety plan that is communicated throughout the organization. There are regional department plans so everybody knows what their piece is, how they contribute to the overall success. And then we produce checklists and job aids and such to make it easy from a day-to-day basis, clearly identify what those expectations are, and then we implement through various initiatives and programs, and then the cycle continues back, feeds back up and down around again. And how do we monitor the performance? We do this daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, on an annual basis through the reviews of various reports and safety performance items, and to look for trends so that we can conduct risk assessments and prevent any risks that surface. And how does this lead specifically to our safety culture? Well, one of the first things is we've had our SMS, our safety management system, in place at Via Rail a year before it became a regulatory requirement. We saw the value in having such a system in place, and we work closely with our regulatory partners to help us develop and implement our safety management system. It's a differentiator for us in our culture. It's quite evident from our President and CEO, the leadership that is displayed by chairing safety meetings on a monthly basis with Frontline. Investment priorities, we've invested a significant amount of monies to improve our infrastructure, our equipment, various systems, technology to help us improve, and the continuous focus on risk management, performance management, and the partnerships that we have with our union partners, the communities, the regulators. It's a joint effort, and we appreciate very much all the support we've received. If you'll permit me, I'll share two excerpts from about our safety culture from outside sources. The first one was during the Railway Safety Act review, and the statement says, among major rail companies, Via Rail has a respected safety management system and entrenched safety culture. The panel also noted that Via takes safety management seriously by making it important to everyone in the company. We discuss this daily. An extract from a third-party auditor. We had to come in and audit the resiliency of our safety management system. Also observed that a safety culture is well embedded throughout the organization. And this isn't an easy thing to do, so we feel our efforts have been well worth it. And I'll invite my colleague Denis to add some more specifics on some of our safety initiatives that have helped.
Thank you, Jean. Des incidents qui sont survenus comme celui de
Incidents that such as the one that happened last summer in Lac Mégantic lead us to rethink our way of doing things, and also prevent us from being too tolerant of risk. We have a real safety culture at Via Rail, and everyone feels involved with it.
Most of my career in the human resources, and one of the main aspects of my job is not only to make sure that compliance is part of our organization, but we bring a safety culture. And it's easy to say that we have a safety culture, but bringing a safety culture is things that takes years, and it takes strong dedication from everybody, especially at the top management. Nous avons ainsi pu être proactifs dans l'adoption.
We have proactively adopted measures to prevent incidents like Lac Mégantic.
Event. Never we were leaving unattended train on the main line or siding. Every train that starts its journey has 2 locomotive engineers in charge, and that practice is in place since the foundation of our corporation. Every locomotive is now equipped with outward-facing camera, and we have just started to testing some voice recording device. Major reasons for train accident, unfortunately, is human errors. We spend a lot of time with training, performance management, mentoring, coaching, etc., to reduce human errors across the organization. But it is imperative that we continue to invest in technology that will not only help us do a good investigation after the fact, but will mainly and more importantly facilitate the job of locomotive engineers. And we are right now working on different technology that we believe will make a very significant step in that direction. We are determined to raise safety standards even more, and we have invested, thanks to the economic action plans from Government of Canada, $80 million to do by introducing various improvements to our infrastructure, more efficient procedures, and new technologies. For instance, we've raised the maintenance standards of our locomotives to meet the highest international level. We've made countless improvements from security fencing, signage, crossing upgrades, and targeted public education. We've closed on our own infrastructure 70 private crossings in the past 3 years. These are crossings on farms and parkland, many of them unprotected. We reach out to each landowner and encourage them to apply for Transport Canada grant to close their crossing. We recently began installing train telemetry system and GPS technology aboard on trains. They are already providing us with rich data about train handling that will help us not only reduce fuel consumptions, but more importantly, improve safety. Using a combination of telemetry, wireless communication, and GPS technology, we're developing our own form of assistant train control. The goal is to provide assistance to the locomotive engineer during critical tasks and minimize the risk of human error, as I said. Un dernier exemple de concert avec les comités locaux de santé et sécurité.
A final example is that we work with communities and health and safety boards. So Via Rail has helped create several zones in the country. They have identified high-risk zones in Canada to help prevent risks.
Into a comprehensive risk-based approach. Via Rail is today highly committed to risk governance. The risk includes train accidents, railway crossing, trespassing incidents. It is a testament to Via Rail's safety culture that, in addition to having an already sound and proven SMS safety management system, Via Rail's management and board of directors decided to put this risk as the top of their priority list in the organization. Autant de décisions et d'interventions qui ont servi à rehausser la sécurité.
Many decisions have helped increase security in all of our operations, and the total effect of these initiatives has allowed Via Rail to have its best security performance in 2013. In 2009, there were 3.6 incidents per a million miles involving our trains, and only 1.3 in all of our network for the year in 2013. That's a 64% decrease since 2009. We have these positive results because every day we try to ensure that there is no serious injury. Another encouraging result is that in 2013 we showed that there were half as many incidents at crossings as in 2009. We are determined to do better. The main way we do this is to have strong partnerships with engaged partners. And this is also thanks to our leadership and internal and external partnerships.
We now move to Unifor, Mr. Diaz and Mr. Stevens. 10 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Chair and members of the committee, for inviting Unifor to discuss our union's perspective on the future of rail safety in Canada as it relates to the Transportation of Dangerous Goods and Safety Management System, SMS. By way of introduction, I am Jerry Dias, National President of Unifor, and with me today is Brian Stevens, National Rail Director. Unifor is a new Canadian union formed on Labor Day weekend 2013 as a result of the combination of the former CAW union and the CEP. Unifor is the largest union operating in the private sector with over 300,000 members working in at least 20 sectors of the economy, including all stages of the economic value chain from resources to manufacturing to transportation to private and public services. We represent close to 85,000 members who work in the federal sector in air, marine, road, telco, and for the purposes of this committee, just over 12,000 of our members work in the rail sector. Our members are involved in performing safety and maintenance inspections and repair of all passenger and freight cars, as well as locomotives at the Class 1 railways, Via Rail, and a number of regional carriers. Transportation of dangerous goods. There are goalposts along the rail bed of every regulatory change, and the July 7, 2013 Lac-Mégantic disaster comes at the tragic cost of 47 innocent lives. Not only did this disaster test the strength and resilience of family and community, but also our country. Public confidence in the industry and the regulatory regime has been radically shaken. Public interests are no longer seen as being satisfied in the current regulatory framework, which regulates Transport Canada as observers and auditors of the industry. The ministerial order of December 26, 2013 in respect to unattended trains and crew size have gone some distance to set out new rules. We do not see this as the end of the road, but rather as the first of many more steps we will need to take to improve rail safety and, more importantly, restore public confidence. In addition to reviewing grades and duration, trades can be left unattended. The following would improve rail safety and would be in the public interest. Reclassify crude oil that is shipped by railway tank cars to reflect its volatility. Immediately ban the transportation of railbit and DOT 111A tank cars that have not been retrofitted to the new C1232 standard as an interim measure. We anticipate that the TSB report will contain specific recommendations to tank car standards. Lower the speed of trains carrying dangerous goods when traveling through municipalities. Ensure that a qualified rail mechanic would inspect all locomotive and freight car equipment before the train can be left unattended. Transport Canada should be responsible to licensing rail car mechanics technicians who have spent 4 years, 8,000 hours in the trade as a TDG inspector. That all trains, and more importantly, trains carrying dangerous commodities, receive a visual safety and maintenance inspection every 1,600 kilometers by qualified rail car mechanics. The SMS system. SMS is an explicit set of processes designed to integrate safety considerations into decision-making, planning, and operational activities. All federally regulated railways are required to have an MSS in place. As a result of the recently amended Railway Safety Act, there is currently a regulatory working group in place developing new SMS regulations, which will include some new provisions, such as defining the accountable executive, enhanced employee involvement in developing SMS. And we are especially pleased to see whistleblower protection finally being afforded to workers in this industry. What is worrisome, though, is the increased reliance and belief by the industry that risk assessments and risk control processes are reliable and unquestionably support implementing a change in operations. While an assessment process may turn a corporation's mind to taking risks into their planning and decision-making processes, our experience in the industry is that the decision to implement the change has already been made, and the risk assessment is simply another report that goes into the file. We have yet to see a risk assessment where the corporation says, wow, we are doing that, it's too dangerous. Under the current regime, SMS risk assessments are privileged and confidential at the behest of the industry. The public will never know what factors were taken into consideration when the industry implemented a change in operations that are in the public interest. It is no wonder that communities and community leaders like Calgary's Mayor...
Mr. Diaz, sorry.
Ça fait à peu près une minute. Je pense que quand le monsieur est rentré, le micro a débranché.
Okay, Mr. Diaz, they'd just like you to speak slightly slower so the interpreters can follow you. No?
It's not. It stopped 1 minute ago. I think they pull out the wire or something like that.
I'm sorry.
So if you can restart 1 minute ago.
One minute ago? So approximately a minute ago, if you could, we won't take that off your time.
Where I started the safety management system, SMS?
Yes.
All right.
Thank you.
SMS is an explicit set of processes designated or designed to integrate safety considerations into decision-making, planning, and operational activities. All federally regulated railways are required to have an SMS in place. As a result of the recently amended Railway Safety Act, there is currently a regulatory working group in place developing new SMS regulations which will include new provisions, such as defining the accountable executive, enhanced employee involvement in developing SMS. And we are especially pleased to see whistleblower protection finally being afforded to workers in this industry. What is worrisome, though, is the increased reliance and belief by the industry that risk assessment and risk control processes are reliable and unquestionably supports implementing a change in operations. While an assessment process may turn a corporation's mind to taking risks in their planning and decision-making processes, our experience in the industry is that the decision to implement the change has already been made, and the risk assessment is simply another report that goes into the file. We have yet to see a risk assessment where the corporations say, wow, we aren't doing that, it's far too dangerous. Under the current regime, SMS risk assessments are privileged and confidential at the behest of the industry. The public will never know what factors were taken into consideration when the industry implemented a change in operations that are in the public interest. It's no wonder that communities and community leaders like Calgary Mayor Nemshi are skeptical of the industry. In our view, SMS risk assessments are nothing more than a lens that corporations are forced to look through when they are contemplating changes to their operations. It does little, if anything, to impact their decisions to make operational changes that serves the shareholders. The industry also operates on the position that the MSS risk assessment is an appropriate substitute for occupational health and safety hierarchy of controls, and it is not. To be clear, the occupational health and safety approach is much different in that it is anchored on a hierarchy of hazard elimination. It is about prevention. Safe railway operation must mean just that, safe. Recognizing hazards and making extraordinary efforts to eliminate the hazard and preventing future hazards must be first and foremost, not developing administrative measures as a way to ignore the hazards in order to find a way to live or die with the risks. We would be happy to take your questions. Would you like to add anything?
No, that's fine. Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Deaton. Yes, excuse me. We now have Mr. Mark Fleming.
I'd like to thank the committee for inviting me here to appear before you. First of all, I'm an organizational psychologist, and I've been studying safety culture for the past 20 years. So I was very pleased to see the prominence of safety culture in this review process. I've been working with a range of safety-critical industries, such as offshore oil and gas, petrochemical, nuclear power, construction, transportation, and I'm currently the CN Professor of Safety Culture. I also contributed to the National Energy Board's recent policy document on safety culture, which will be relevant for pipeline transportation. I think it's useful to sort of, when we talk about safety culture, and a number of witnesses have already mentioned it, to define what we mean by that term. The definition I use is safety culture refers to the attitudes, values, norms and beliefs which a particular group of people share with respect to risk and safety. Safety culture has been around as a concept for over a quarter of a century now and was coined initially from the Chernobyl nuclear disaster. Safety culture can be viewed as the heart or the soul of an organization's safety management system, as it provides the energy or drive to bring the safety management system to life. Safety culture determines the extent to which an organization lives its safety management system. The safety management system describes how an organization controls hazards. For these controls to be effective, they need to be implemented in practice. Safety culture determines to a greater or lesser extent the degree to which these controls are implemented as intended. Therefore, an effective functioning of a safety management system requires a positive safety culture, which is somewhat different to a safety management system gives you a positive safety culture. It actually is a necessary prerequisite for the safety management system to work as intended. There are many different safety culture models and frameworks, and there is a high degree of overlap between safety culture models, and most models cover the majority of important dimensions such as leadership commitment. Much time and effort, mainly by people like me, has been dedicated to arguing which model is best and which one is better than the other. Broadly speaking, these debates have been of not much use. Most models are adequately acceptable and cover the main themes and concepts, and therefore we should spend less time arguing about which model is best and choose one that works for us and implement it. There is many different frameworks, and the one that's been adopted by the rail industry or developed is fine, and yet it's different from others. I think it's also important to have a sense of why safety culture is important. There's good evidence linking safety culture with important safety outcomes. Numerous studies have shown a link between worker perceived safety culture and injury rates in that organization. There's also evidence linking safety culture threats to major disasters, such as the Deepwater Horizon or the Chernobyl incident, as I mentioned before. There's been recent research conducted in the nuclear industry in the US, linking, again, employees' perceptions of the safety culture to nuclear plant status, which is the main primary indicator of the level of safety within a nuclear installation. So there's good evidence showing that safety culture, irrespective of how you approach it or measure it, is associated with important safety outcomes. I think it's important, though, to focus a little bit on what organizations should do when we talk about safety culture. If I were a senior leader in a safety-critical organization, I would want to have an accurate picture of our safety culture, including strengths and weaknesses. I would want to know that we had active processes to promote a positive safety culture and how these processes are working in practice. I would also want to know my role and the role of my direct reports in promoting a positive safety culture. Safety-critical organizations should adopt a systematic approach to promoting a positive safety culture. This should be a continuous improvement process which includes a clear vision of the desired safety culture, clearly articulated roles for key groups such as managers, specific activities to promote the desired culture, ongoing safety culture assessments, auditing, and program review. One of the things that gets a lot of attention when we talk about safety culture is safety culture assessment. And there are a range of different methods and tools that can be used, and a lot of the work that's been done over the last 20 years has principally been in this field. Assessment can be helpful in identifying areas of relative strength and weakness that can be used to guide improvement activities. Often, there is too much focus on safety culture assessment and not enough focus on improvement. There is, I think, a naive belief that if we measure something, sort of by definition, we will be able to improve it or change it. And that's often not the case. Knowing that it's raining is often not desperately helpful unless you've got a strategy to stop it raining, which we don't. Assessment, for the sake of assessment, provides little or no value and may in fact do harm. It is therefore important that safety culture assessments are only conducted as part of an improvement strategy. So what I'm trying to say is organizations should not conduct a safety culture assessment unless they plan to improve as a result of that assessment. And that's all I've got for you. If you've got questions, I'm happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fleming. We'll now move to questioning. Mr. Mai, 7 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Merci aux témoins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for being here today. It's really important for us to hear what's happening on the ground. I'd like to start with Via Rail. I love your service. I think it's very important, and I'm lucky enough to often use your services. But honestly, you know, I feel safe when I'm taking your trains, and I think people do. And it would be good if Via Rail could offer even more service and people could take the train more often, because it's a very good way to travel. And it's good for the environment as well. However, in terms of safety, you mentioned infrastructure. We know that with privatization, the privatization of the railways, often Via Rail does not own the tracks. So you have to depend on companies that own the railways. And sometimes those companies do their own inspections, and then Via Rail will say, no, that's not safe enough for the passengers, so we won't use those tracks. I'm between Miramichi and Bathurst. I'm interested in those tracks. As you know, there's a section of that that is not functional, and so passenger service has been affected. Also between Moncton and Edmundston, we would need more investments in infrastructure because there are problems with that. So could you tell us a little bit about why there are problems with those sections of the tracks?
The infrastructure, we're really talking about the infrastructure that's on the north shore of New Brunswick, which is between Campbellton and through to Moncton. And as you know, there's about 44 miles of infrastructure there that CN has applied to abandon. We are looking at options. We've continuously looked at options as Via Rail, but we're not in a position to buy the line. We're not really interested in buying the line. we will operate if it's safe to operate. On the other hand, if there is some arrangement that can be made, we're certainly, we would certainly want to operate in northern New Brunswick if we can. The population base is along the northern Brunswick line, more so than along the Edmundston line. So there is still some time before the actual abandonment is effective, and we're going to take the time to see if there is some agreement that we can make.
J'espère vraiment qu'on va trouver une solution parce que ce serait très...
I really hope that a solution will be found, because it would be very sad to have to abandon those tracks, particularly if you look at the history of Canada and how Canada was built. And, once those tracks are abandoned, then there won't be any long-term investment. So I really hope the government will work with you to find a long-term solution. I think it's very important. Mr. Diaz?
SMS, we know, having asked Transport Canada, having read the Auditor General's report, having heard about from TSB, there are some issues with respect to resources within Transport Canada that they can't do their own follow-up. We know that there are issues, but there's no follow-up because they don't have resources. We also have issues with respect to SMSs, where we're not even sure if Transport Canada really has the time to look at them. Actually, we know they don't. They don't have time to audit all the SMS. And it is a concern for us to know that, to wonder what's happening. How do we know whether or not the system in place is the right system? What would you recommend in order to make sure that the public knows and feel reassured that the SMS are well in place and are valid?
Right. Yeah, I'll take that question if you don't mind. So, in terms of SMS in our industry, there's in a sense two lenses. There's one that we look through for occupational health under Part 2 of the Code, and those risk assessments and the SMS through that lens is driven on a hierarchy, as Jerry said earlier, on a hierarchy of hazard elimination. Under the Railway Safety Act, though, those risk assessments are on trying to find a way to live with the risks. So when we see a number of operational changes that come through, and some of them are, in our view, and in the railways, or in our union's view, are not in the public interest. And that's worrisome, because the public is not aware of what those operational changes are going to be that is going to run through their community. And they may very well be safe or reasonable, or they may not, but there's no way to have the consultation with those communities. And I think that if the regime does not open itself up to providing some transparency to those communities, then at least those risk assessments and that the material that the railways provide should be made public at some point.
Ouais. Un des arguments, des échanges qu'on va avoir avec les...
One of the things we will be talking about with the railway companies has to do with regulation. Since privatization and since the Liberals abandoned the public railway system, there's been more and more privatization, there has been less and less regulation. Now, people will say that there are regulations that exist, but I think you both mentioned the fact that MMA was allowed to have an exemption by the government, and they were allowed to have this exemption to have only one operator. All across Canada, people are saying, no, that's not safe, you need to have two engineers, but then the government gave an exemption to MMA, and we know what happened in Lac Mégantic. Now, we'll let the TSB do the review, but for both of you, Unifor and Via Rail, what do you think about letting companies decide whether there should be one or two engineers? And also, what's your opinion on what I would call deregulation? At Via Rail, we like to think that we don't need an independent third party to implement a safety culture. I think that the measures that we have at Via Rail to ensure that safety is respected are at least as rigorous as those that would be implemented by a third party. As you mentioned, you use Via Rail services. You're one of our customers. And one of the main reasons that people take the train is that they feel comfortable and relaxed when they do so. And the reason they feel comfortable and relaxed is that they feel safe. So I'm audited 4 million times per year by passengers who say that they feel safe. And if those people don't feel safe, then that presents a risk to our business. Our core business is based on safety. So we need to be obsessed with safety every day. And what really drives us is not so much compliance, it's having this safety culture, because that's one of the main reasons people do business with us.
Period. When we deregulated the industry and went into private hands, it became about a profit-sharing center as opposed to a public service. So it's about money. That's why the only way that we can deal with this is through specific regulations, period. And we've said that there has to be two. We have to have two people for in the industry. So not one, not leave it up to the CNCP, who frequently ask for exceptions themselves, by the way, but it has to be very specific, and we have to be very specific that we need to. It's the only way to eliminate the lackmagantics of the world from happening in the future.
Thank you. Now I'll move to Mr. McGinney, 7 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. Mr. Del Bosco, I want to start with you if I could. There's a local issue here that's very important to raise. Many of my constituents are asking about the crossings at Jockvale and Strandherd Roads in Ottawa. Can you tell the House, tell people who are interested and concerned about this, whether this has been corrected? Has Via Rail corrected the problem there?
Well, just to qualify it, we realize that the issues over the last few months at these crossings has been an inconvenience to the residents of Ottawa. We understand that. We just want to say that at no time was safety compromised, because these devices are basically the default position of the device is safe, so the barrier closes. To try and appease the concerns that people have, we have worked out a communication protocol with the City of Ottawa to make sure that when an occurrence happens, information is given quickly. And we've also put some people on location at some of these locations. Again, not because there is an immediate danger, because if there's an issue with the circuit, the gate will come down and it's rail safe. So we're continuing to work with the suppliers, the manufacturers, and a third body that's going to, and we're waiting for a report to come out actually tomorrow, a draft report, to see what recommendations they have to make them more reliable.
Good. Mr. Pinsonneau, you alluded to the fact that Via's board of directors and management and the company as a whole puts safety as a top priority. So I want to ask you, and I want to ask Mr. Dias, have you read the Auditor General's report on rail safety, and to what extent are you both seized with the details?
Sorry, I didn't get the...
Have you read the Auditor General of Canada's report on rail safety?
Mm-hmm.
Has your board of directors read the report? Have your lawyers read the report? And Mr. Dias, to what extent are you and your union colleagues seized with the details of the recommendations in here? And the reason I ask this is simple. We've had a series of witnesses come forward and tell us that there are SMSs in play, and no doubt that there's a strong culture of safety at VIA. There's no doubt there's one apparently at CNCP. Although I asked the Executive Vice President of CN Rail this week, whether or not he was seized with this report, and his answer was, quote, "It's not my job." Unbelievable. It's not my job to worry that the regulator's given enough money to regulate, close quote. can you tell us, have you read it? Because despite all that you're saying, all your testimony, I think Canadians are going to believe the Auditor General before anybody else. The management of Via Rail, CNCP, Labour Movement, they're going to believe the Auditor General. And if you're seized with the findings in this report, it's really, 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 really serious business here. So to what extent are you aware of what's going on here now in terms of Transport Canada's failings?
I may. So we have read the report, and that's one of the reasons, though, that we don't rely on anyone else other than ourselves to conduct audits, to continuously monitor our safety performance. The auditors of Transport Canada have been very present with us, I must say, from a verification, even on previous audits, and I don't believe that was reflected in the report, all of the information, but they've been very present in our
Well, the main conclusion of this report from the Auditor General is this. Transport Canada can't say whether or not the SMS system's actually in place and providing safety. It's really simple here. This is a conclusive audit done. In 3 years, carrying 4 million passengers a year, Via Rail was not audited once by Transport Canada in detail. Not once. 25% of the audits that are required to keep our private sector railways safe, only 25% were conducted based on what Transport Canada says is required. So it's, it's partly holding Via Rail's feet to the fire, and CN and CP, but it's also the role of the regulator, of Transport Canada to do its job. And if you go through this report, it's outrageous in terms of the details of what's going on here. We can't sweep this under the carpet. It's all here in black and white. It's so serious, the Auditor General said when he testified, he's coming back to look at this again in a kind of a midterm, mid-course correction way. So, I mean, have you taken this to your board? Do you see that there are only 9 inspectors when they need 20? Do you see that only 25% of audits have been conducted? Do you see that they can't even conclude that there is an SMS system that's worthy in place? So what are Canadians riding Via Rail supposed to make of this? What are the workers for Unifor supposed to make of this? Mr. Dias, can you help us understand?
Absolutely. Go ahead, and then I'll complement what he says.
Yeah. So from the term of the freight railways, the SMS system, the Auditor General has got it right in terms of the inability of TC to do the audits. And I think our opening comments kind of reflect the position in terms of SMS, is that SMS, in our view, is kind of a bureaucratic process that probably, there's probably enough documents to fill this room up, and in many instances doesn't advance safety. And I've gleaned over the report. I've read the testimony of the Auditor General here at this committee, and I look forward to reading his comments later. Again,
let me just remind Mr. Dias before he steps in. Quote, work plans are vague in terms of timelines for monitoring progress on important safety issues. Quote, critical information is missing. We don't have Federal Railways risk assessments. We don't have information on the sections of track used in transporting dangerous goods. We don't have information on the condition of railway bridges. We don't have the financial information of privately owned Federal Railways not publicly available. Quote, there is a 3-year cycle for auditing SMSs of each Federal Railway. They did 14 audits in 3 fiscal years, 26% of what they actually required themselves. Via Rail was not audited in 3 years. Audit scope's very limited. Quote, conclusion, these findings indicate that Transport Canada does not have the assurance it needs that Federal Railways have implemented adequate and effective safety management systems. Even the methodology used to determine the inspections is flawed, says the report. It goes on and on. What are we to make of this, and how can Canadians trust what you're saying when this is the definitive, objective assessment of what's going on?
Let me ask you this question. Can you imagine if we regulated the airline industry this way? You don't have a quarrel with us as it relates to regulation. Let's take this another step farther. 5 years ago, if we're talking about, I won't talk about Via, but I'll talk about the transportation of dangerous crude. 5 years ago, we had 1 inspector for every 5 cars. Today, we have 1 inspector for every 4,000. So, shall we continue the discussion on the slippery slope?
Okay, thank you. Now move to Mr. Watson, 7 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to our witnesses for appearing here today. Mr. Dias, allow me a moment to share on the public record what I shared with you just a few moments before the hearing began, but my personal congratulations on your election as to the leadership of Unifor, and we certainly wish you well in your efforts. Just to clarify some of what Mr. McGuinty just put on the record here, if we go back to the 2007 Independent Rail Advisory Panel report, with respect to safety management systems, they had suggested that to achieve the pinnacle of a safety management system is to increase the number of audits while decreasing the number of inspections. And I'm not sure that anyone, Canadians included, would feel comfortable if inspections were replaced by system audit. The situation now, and while we take the Auditor General's advice on needing to do more audits, the number of inspections have actually increased. Traditional inspections to a level of 30,000 over what was normally about 20,000 a year. And so we think that that is also an important thing, that we don't abandon the number of inspections simply to increase audits. So we take the correction by the Auditor General well. I want to start, Professor Fleming, your comments on safety culture. I used to work for Chrysler in one of its previous iterations. They had 5 measurements in their plant: safety, quality, delivery, cost, morale. If you were to talk to workers on the shop floor, they certainly felt that morale was the bottom of the heap. But if you had moved that to the front end, you'd have improved quality, safety, delivery, and cost down the chain. Can you comment a little bit on measuring safety culture, or the importance of the employee feeling safe in the environment, and how they can participate in driving safety culture with the corporation, and what are the barriers to that?
Okay, so safety culture, in some ways, it's hard to divide away from the broader organizational culture. So that's one of the issues when you talk about morale and other.
So leadership at the top drives safety culture. Is that what you're concluding?
Yeah. So there's many components. So definitely senior leader commitment is one of the biggest components of the culture in terms of determining what that culture looks like and how people feel about that culture. From a frontline perspective, they are the people who are at risk, and they are the people who are implementing the majority of control measures that are going to be in place. So when we talk about hazard control and administrative controls, really that relies on employees principally complying with different rules and procedures. So sometimes people can get a bit confused about what we mean about safety culture, because they look at the safety outcomes and they see it's mainly somebody at the front line who has made a mistake or an error, and therefore it seems like it's an employee issue, when principally what the evidence shows is that it's a leadership commitment issue.
And actually, it's interesting you point that out, because I think I heard that with respect to Via's testimony today, that it's about human error. And if I can find quickly Mr. Vena's testimony at CN, he said that they conduct 1,000 audits per day, quote, to see what our employees are doing, as if the employees are the ones who are causing the safety problem.
I think it's always a bit of a challenge to separate these things out. Clearly, the employees are the people who are at risk. So yes, you want to know what's going on at the front line, because that is a reflection of your culture. Sure. To not sound paternalistic, but a way to sort of think about this in an everyday sense is to think about your children and your parenting style. So we all get embarrassed when our children freak out and behave inappropriately in a public place. And the reason we're embarrassed is because everybody knows it's a reflection of how we parent, whether we like it or not. Yes. And while it's not quite the same in an organization, that gives you the sense that it's important to look at the activities, behavior, and of frontline staff, but not to judge it, but to judge it in terms of, well, this is a reflection of my behavior. This is what I'm showing is important, and I need to change what I do. That's the lesson I would look, but it would be to reflect it back at me.
Okay, and I appreciate that. I know, Mr. Dias, you would say on behalf of your members that they're very actively engaged as much as they can be to work safely in an environment. As a Chrysler employee, I knew how to exercise a work refusal, for example, if there were components of my workstation that weren't safe. So I know that they're actively engaged. I want to probe a little bit in terms of what you know and the union's participation on behalf of workers with the corporate organization on their safety management systems. Are you involved at all, or do you see the risk assessments that they produce? Do they share that with you at least on behalf?
Yeah. Yes, during the risk assessment process, be it under the Railway Safety Act or under the SMS and Occupational Health and Safety, we usually have 1 or 2 members who participate in the risk assessment process.
Are you involved in the risk planning about where to target risk assessments?
No.
You're not. Okay. Goal setting, safety goals for the organization. Are you actively part of that process?
No, we're not part of that process. Although we do sit on the policy committee, so in a sense it comes down from above.
But the pending regulations, as a result of S4, will very much more formalize the union in that particular process, and that will be an important step forward on behalf of workers to ensure that they're moving forward on in the active planning and information sharing around improving safety management systems.
Which we spoke of in Jerry's opening comments about our participation, enhancing employee participation. But again, we'll see when the regulations come out.
Fair enough. And I want to ask as well about onboard video cameras. If I understood now that is there a difference between your position and that of, say, CN and CP? I'm just trying to remember offhand, Chair, and you'll have to forgive me here at the table, and I don't want to misrepresent this, but I think that at least CN had suggested that they not only wanted outward-facing cameras, but inward-facing cameras, and I don't know what their policy is. They say they're aligned with the TSB's recommendation, but I know theirs has caveats about how you use video, onboard video. Can you discuss your position, what you would see it used for and not used for, and whether that differs from the railway company's perception of how we should do that? Because obviously, if we're going to be making some recommendations in the report, we want to be clear about what we could be recommending.
So yes, there is a difference of opinion in terms of the rail unions and the employers in terms of the use of in-cab voice recorders and video cameras. And our position has been with the industry and with TC is that we're not opposed to cameras. Our position would be that the cameras inside the cab would be focused on the equipment, that is the gauges, the rail stand to see what position the throttle might have been in, those items. There's no need to be having a video camera looking at the face of a locomotive engineer. It should actually be on the equipment. And in-cab voice recordings we're not opposed to either, provided they're used exclusively by Transport Canada to investigate accidents.
The TSB to investigate?
Yes, sorry, TSB,
yes.
To investigate. And in fact, in our last round of bargaining, we came to an agreement with Via Rail, our union did, in terms of allowing them that if these in-cab cameras and voice recorders, they agreed that they would not be used for surreptitious reasons such as listening in to conversations. They would not be used for anything other than as provided currently in the TSB Act, and that is for investigating accidents.
Now, Unifor represents VIA workers.
Sorry, Mr. Watson, your time has expired, but I did want to, because I think it's very pertinent to what we just heard from Mr. Stevens. Would Via Rail comment on that same question, if that's okay with the committee members?
You mean?
Yes.
Recorders.
We believe in the usage of inward-facing camera and voice recording. Our position in the industry so far has been that it should be used within the SMS, not only for investigation conducted by TSB, because we believe it's a useful tool to better understand what's going on a day-to-day basis. We certainly understand the concerns raised by our unions. They have shared their concern to us, and we're confident that we'll be able to find a way to use a voice recording in such a way that it will improve safety and at the same time addressing the concerns mainly on privacy addressed by the unions.
Okay, thank you very much. I think it was important to hear that. Mr. Braid, 7 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to our panel of witnesses for being here today. Mr. Del Bosco, I wanted to start with you, if I could, with a couple of questions for Via Rail. You mentioned in your opening remarks that one of the things that Via Rail does to improve safety, to increase the level of safety, is that you engage in a public education program. Could you just elaborate on what's involved with that program?
Yes, I'll ask my colleague Jean to elaborate. She's very much involved.
Thank you.
Yeah, with pleasure. Thank you. So the main avenue that we use to educate the municipalities is through the Operation Lifesaver organization, where we do outreach in various community events and through schools. We work actually closely with our American partners as well to see what are the new avenues, what are new ways to get volunteers to go out and raise rail safety awareness. We participate on the board of directors and the steering committee, the program review committees, and we're continuously out. And that's one of the things that we did when we were able to close all those crossings, is we went and knocked on doors of people that live along the tracks just to raise awareness and to let them know about the Transport Canada program. If you're prepared to close this, it'll be safer and you'll get a little bit of money. So we do everything we can. We're a small group of resources, but we're out there.
Okay. And does this important public education, this outreach component, does it receive sort of dedicated resources as part of Via Rail's budget?
Yes, it happens through the corporate safety and security team, and as well, though, we have locomotive engineers that volunteer their time, that go out and meet the people in their communities and let them know they drive the trains along those tracks, and to be aware, to heed all of the automatic warning devices.
Okay, thank you. I also want to ask about the work that you've done with respect to improving crossing upgrades or improving rail crossings. You mentioned that you've made a very conscious effort in this regard. You've closed 70 to improve safety. Could you elaborate specifically on what you've done in this area, and have you taken advantage of the government's grade crossing improvement program in this regard?
As I mentioned earlier, we've invested in the last couple of years more than $80 million to improve safety on our own infrastructure. Thanks to the Economic Action Plan, a portion of that money has been invested in making sure that all our public crossing on our own infrastructure are equipped with the most modern technology available, so they are fully protected with gates and lights. We are also investing in what we call CTC, that's Controlled Centralized Traffic, so there's no dark territory on our own infrastructure. So all the infrastructure is signaled. So we've done also a lot of bridge repair, etc. But the work that we've done on our infrastructure to make sure that all our crossings, the public crossings, are fully protected, I think is the main answer. And I'd like to add to what Jean has mentioned on the working with the community. Our locomotive engineers who circulate on the network across the country every day we have a responsibility, and we initiate a program with them, very, I think, unique, where they identify every day if they see a fence that is broken, if they see a situation around the road that could cause a risk for trespasser or crossing, they report that situation to their manager, to the local committee, and every month Steve and I attend a call, and the managers have to report on situations that have been brought to the attention of the locomotive engineers. And then we take with that, we go back to the community, the police, the school, etc., and we inform them about that situation that's been brought to our attention, and we try and we work with the community to reduce or to eliminate that situation. And it's been done across the country.
So this is an ongoing process, is it? Okay, very good. Professor Fleming, a question for you. You draw a linkage between employee perception and the level of or the state of a safety culture within an organization. Could you just expand on that a little bit, please?
Okay, so broadly speaking, when we assess safety culture, we tend to do it from an employee perception perspective. So if we're using a survey, for example, we're measuring employees' perceptions of management commitment to safety, and that can give us some insight into the broader culture. It's more from a measurement perspective than anything else. So it's important to remember that it is a perception of something, not a reality, and can be influenced by other factors. But that's one of the ways we try to understand what's going on. And what we do know about those perceptions is that they're linked to employee behaviour, which is also linked to likelihood to be involved in an accident. So if I'm an employee, I don't believe my manager is committed to safety, I am more likely to be involved in an accident than if an employee who does believe I'm committed to safety, irrespective of what the manager actually is committed to or not.
Okay. And Mr. Diaz, from Unifor's perspective, could you, I'm interested in your perspective, your comments on Professor Fleming's analysis on his work with respect to the importance of a safety culture, employee perception, etc.
Well, there's no question. The safety culture, everybody has to be involved in it, whether or not you're running the company or you work for the company. I'm not sure I share the same sentiment that somehow the employees' input as it relates to safety or their version of events is somehow skewed. I'm not sure I agree with the terminology that somehow our perception may be based on a variety of different factors. I would suggest to you that whether or not it's safety related as it relates to the individual employee's job that is performed that day, or the issue of safety as it relates to the running of whether or not it's V or whether or not it's CN or CP, whether or not it's a safety related to the community, I would suggest to you that the employees that do this 40 hours a week have a much broader understanding than I would suggest consultants, and I would also suggest people who may sit in offices as opposed to work in that environment day in, day out.
Okay. Mr. Diaz, my final question for you. If you could do 3 things to improve rail safety in this country, Mr. Diaz, or if Unifor could do 3 things, what would those 3 things be?
Well, both of us are going to answer that question. Number 1, I think the regulations have to be very specific. I believe that in an industry that's profit-driven, and I'm not suggesting, by the way, that profit is a nasty word. I'm not suggesting that at all. But what I am suggesting is companies like MMA that have opportunities because the larger players have spun off the non-profitable routes, therefore are looking to cut corners in order to make a profit. The only way that that can be, or those issues can be resolved, is by very strict regulation. So, for example, and I talked about it earlier on, 2-person inspectors. So that would be, I would suggest to you, the regulation would be the key piece. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you.
And just the other, deal with DOT 111As, eliminate the uncertainty, deal with that. That has to be dealt with. Public confidence is being shattered because of this indecision on DOT 111As. That's one. Put an end to the exemptions to the railways. We have a regulatory regime, and then there's a back door to walk themselves out of the exemptions. That's 2. And then in terms of our mechanics, license our mechanics in a similar fashion as they are in the airline industry, so that when our mechanic says that locomotive or that freight car is not safe to go, there's a maintenance issue, there's a safety issue, that freight car or that tank car or that locomotive should be repaired, and it's not in this industry.
Thank you. Now move to Mr. Sullivan, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the witnesses. For Via Rail, the issue of positive train control was expressly referred to in the report on the Burlington collision. And it sounds as though you're down the road a little bit towards positive train control, but you've got a long way to go. CN and CP are implementing positive train control, but only in the United States. There is no regulation yet in Canada with regards to positive train control. Do you think there should be?
It's a good question. Whether there should be a regulation or not, Via Rail has decided 2 years ago to work on the implementation of technologies that we believe will achieve a good proportion of what a PTC system could bring at a much lower cost. We're in that route right now. We expect that within, let's say, probably 4 years, we'll be able to put in place technologies that will not only help us understand the accidents, but will mainly facilitate the job of our locomotive engineers with providing them with more information on what's going on the track and providing us information on the reaction of locomotive engineers, so we have the capacity to, the system has the capacity to intervene if there is a reaction that is not in line with what she's supposed to be. So if there's a regulation, that's fine. But right now, VRL is not waiting for a regulation. We're working on implementing some technology that we believe will have a significant impact on safety in the short term.
Mr. Diaz, you suggested that for the public interest, 3 things need to happen. We need to reclassify crude oil. We need to immediately ban the .111s. And we need to lower the speed that dangerous goods are traveling through municipalities. Last week, CP suggested that lowering the speeds was not something they would consider, but the Transportation Safety Board told us that even at 20 miles an hour, the .111s will break, will fracture. So it sounds like there's going to be a conflict between what the railroads want and what the public wants. You're recommending, therefore, that we, like we did after the Mississauga train derailment, lower speeds in urban areas.
Correct.
And with regards to the .111s, you're recommending that we make a decision, just do it, get rid of them.
Correct. You will find even Hunter Harrison is saying they should be eliminated. And this is the first time I heard that we used to have 1 in 5 crude car inspections. Now we have 1 in 4,000. That is an astounding number. Coming back to the issue of risk assessment, you suggested, Mr. Diaz, that Mr. Diaz, sorry, that the risk assessments conducted by the railroads are kind of after the fact. They make a decision, and then they do a risk assessment and put it in a drawer somewhere. We asked specifically CN and CP last week whether or not they'd done risk assessments for the 400 times multiplication of the transportation of crude oil, and they didn't know. We also asked if they'd done a risk assessment for the abandonment of the Northern Ontario lines that would have avoided going through heavily populated areas, particularly Southern Ontario and Toronto. And they didn't know. However, the good news is CN at least said that they would provide their corridor risk assessments to this committee, which is the first time I think anybody said that they're going to provide a risk assessment that they've done. What is your view of these risk assessments, and are they like project and defend? In other words, we'll do something and then we'll defend it with a risk assessment. Is that really what's going on?
Certainly that's our experience in terms of the freight railways. The decision is already made that they're going to implement an operational change, whether they want to leave westward trains out of Winnipeg, for instance, give them about 7 miles to let their braking come back up to 100%. But those decisions have already been made. Operationally, then they just send out the crew, their team, to conduct the risk assessment. And the risk assessment really just, once it's completed, gets thrown in the file and off we move. Because in the risk assessment process, as Jerry said in his opening comments, there's never been one in my experience where the railways have done the risk assessment and said, my goodness, this is way too dangerous, we're not doing it. They simply don't do it. It doesn't matter whether it's even in the face of prior events. All the risk assessment does is just to provide a bit of a lens, and they say, well, let's try and do these items to mitigate the risk.
And the other example, I guess, is the abandonment by CN of the railroad that VIA would like to use will in fact cause a risk in that only one freight railroad will be available across the Maritimes through Plaster Rock, and we know what happened recently at Plaster Rock with the explosion of a oil-carrying system, which, if that had been the case, there would be no way across the Maritimes. And that's a risk apparently CN's willing to take because they're going to abandon it, but is the Canadian public willing to take that risk is the next question. And I'm going to ask Mr. Del Bosco from VIA if, in fact, you are not planning to purchase the CN line. Why is it that you are willing to spend $500 million on lines in Ontario but nothing in New Brunswick?
Well, right now the ocean is is a train that loses somewhere between 11 or 12 to $15 million a year. So we're ready to operate the train, but we also have to act in a commercial way as well, and look at the fact that if we invest money to purchase a line, and we're investing to continue an operating loss, there's a little bit of a disconnect. So we're interested in serving in moving on that northern line, but we'd like to find another way other than purchasing the line to do so.
Ms. Young, 5 minutes.
Thank you, and thank you very much for being here today, and it's been very interesting hearing your testimony. As you know, we're embarking on this study because of certain incidents, and, you know, being a new person on this committee, as well as, I guess, being a Canadian that's observing all of this, it was quite surprising, I think, to the general public where the gaps were in terms of safety on the rail systems. Now, I'm a sociologist and have studied communities across Canada, so of course we recognize the fact that communities have actually grown around the railway system, the railroad tracks and stops and all of that sort of thing, because we have a certain history, of course, in Canada with the railway system. I guess what I want to know is how much work do you feel has been done currently, I mean, not just because of this recent study perhaps, but over, say, the last 5, 10, 20 years, to gather that information and to actually look at, you know, the entire rail system and what can be done to protect it, or has nothing been done and we're just responding to, you know, a situation here? If perhaps Mr. Bosco can answer that question.
I'm not aware of extensive studies that have been done. I think it often is the municipalities that take on that role. As you mentioned, communities kind of build themselves around tracks, and eventually there's traffic congestion that develops and other safety issues that could develop. So there's part of it has to be the community itself that is involved in reaching out to the railway, and obviously the railway as well has to reach out to the community if we are seeing, and as Jean explained before, when we have incidences and we measure them and we know when they happen and how often they happen, we will reach out to communities to do something or to help us. Whether it's programs, as Jean had described earlier, or whether it's to start looking at better ways of protecting citizens and better ways of ensuring the traffic flow is safe and can move.
Right. Just because I have a number of questions for a number of you, I'm going to ask you to keep your responses as brief as possible. But so what you're saying to me then is that for over 100 years, we have not sort of done, I don't know, every decade review the entire safety railroad system in Canada and said, look, there's this community here, or there's these poor practices here over crossings because it's in, you know, family areas or whatever it happens to be, and you know, in itself the rail system monitor and or develop these kinds of safety I guess risk assessments in itself to say, like, there's no sort of yearly review or anything like that. You're saying to me that there is none in place.
Sorry, if I may. Through the Railway Association of Canada, we're monitoring that continuously, and we're working more closely now with the FCM, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, a lot more strategically. They're helping, they're introducing regulations, and Montreal was one of the first cities, I'm pleased to say, that adopted it because there's a lot of high-risk areas, but working very closely, doing lots of outreach. Coming up the week of April 28th is Public Rail Safety Week. Minister Raitt has offered to do a presentation in the Greater Toronto area because of the dense population, and hoping to raise awareness even more so. But continuous looking at this, studies are ongoing, and everyone is doing as much as they can, trying to just keep raising awareness.
Would it be possible, because I've got very limited time here, for you to submit some kind of a report or an update on this whole aspect? How closely are you working with the communities? How current is that? What systems are being put into place to protect? I mean, we've all seen those pictures of, people running across the tracks with 2 or 3 kids, and it blows my mind because I have kids.
Engineers see that every day.
Exactly.
It's very distressful.
That is my point. So I guess what I'm saying is, instead of being distressed about seeing those pictures, we need to be doing something about them. And I would like to know, on this committee, what is being done about them and what kinds of plans are being put into place. Final question for you very quickly, and it's a yes or no question. Is $80 million enough that you put in?
Never enough.
Because the railroads are getting old, the ties are, everything's getting old.
Well, those are maintained to standard, though, so safety is not an issue in that sense. However, there are communities growing along the tracks every day. New buildings are going up, new housing communities. So it's a continuous challenge to stay on top of it. And there's been a lot of outreach from the railways, not only via rail, because we're fairly small, but we do knock on the doors of people along our tracks. But CN and CP have been very present in the communities in the recent years, trying to raise awareness through the Railway Safety Act review. There was a request by the industry to have joint risk assessments with communities. If they are considering building, talk to us. Let's find a way to do it safely for everybody. So there has been outreach. So we'll certainly, has the Railway Association of Canada spoken? Because we'll reach out to them to get the studies for you.
Well, I think it's a really important thing, and just very quickly, that communities recognize, or somehow it's put to them, that they have a responsibility too. It's not just the railways.
Partnerships.
The partnerships have to happen.
Yes. And so the Railway Association, if I may just say, has been on the agenda for the Canadian Communities Association to speak about rail safety awareness. Just at every opportunity, we're trying to get out there.
Okay, thank you. And Ms. Tierney, just on that more to add a little more substance to it. Basically what you're saying is you would like to see a little more input or better planning by communities around existing rail lines, etc.
Correct.
Okay.
Anything we can do together.
Thank you very much. We'll now move to Ms. Moran, 5 minutes.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Mr. Fleming, you had a very interesting comment earlier. You said if I were a manager, I wouldn't ask myself any question as to what method. I would wonder how it works, what is the clear vision of our objectives, how evaluate the method, the strength, the weaknesses. I think that is very interesting. I wish VIA would answer these questions. You mentioned the fact that you were looking beyond the regulation. Very often we don't do our proper self-criticism. We don't wonder what our weaknesses are. And I was wondering whether you could answer these questions.
I'd be very happy to answer your question. I can give you a very current example. We have 23 local health and safety committees across the country. Each of those is made up of union members and management members, so in equal parts. They meet every month to see what's been happening in that environment. And there are minutes that are produced for each of those meetings. Those minutes are sent to us, and we read them every month. Every month we meet with all of our managers who bring us up to date with incidents that have happened, and we try to find ways of improving those methods. Another example I could give is this week, all of the co-managers for these health and safety committees across the country have been invited to invite in an annual conference in Montreal. And Mr. Diaz will open the session along with Mr. Del Bosco. And we will have the opportunity to reevaluate our culture of safety along with the members of those local committees. Following those meetings, new safety objectives will be identified, both by the union members and the managers, and then there will be a meeting of the policy committee, and the reports will be presented on the updating of those objectives. Okay, thank you very much. Now, this may be difficult to say this publicly, but could you give me one of Via Rail's weaknesses in terms of safety? Because, of course, you have to be able to admit your weaknesses if you want to make progress. Well, I think that our greatest success is both our greatest weakness and our greatest enemy. Over these past few years, we've said that we're making great progress, but that doesn't mean that we can stop trying. Okay, thank you. Another question. In your presentation, and also Mr. Diaz, in your presentation, you said that often the human error is the greatest threat to safety and security. But throughout your presentation, and also throughout CNNCP's presentation last week, there was a lot of talk about new technology that would be implemented. And we talked a lot about how new technology will help us. But they didn't necessarily say which indicators will be looked at in terms of human error. So I would like to know which resources precisely are you using to improve safety in terms of eliminating human error? I'm very happy that I have the opportunity to answer that question because, yes, in fact, reducing human errors, human error is the greatest cause of accidents, but that doesn't mean that it's necessarily the employee's fault. It's our job to create an environment through coaching, training, and good equipment and risk assessment and so on. It's our responsibility to help the employee act in a safer manner. So the human himself is not necessarily the main cause of accidents. Currently, what we're doing in terms of implementing new technology to reduce the number of accidents is we're working along with our union partners, and we're spending a lot of time evaluating the human factors that could help reduce the number of accidents in trains. Could you list those for us? Well, training, people's ability to react to incidents. Sometimes there's new information that comes up during the trip that could be misinterpreted. Then the employee needs to be able to react suddenly to sudden occurrences, and all of that contributes to the good operation of trains. Mr. Stevens, did you have something to add?
There's an over-reliance in the industry on technology. And the technology, and I've often said it's not proven. An example of that would be in the coal train system that's running from Swirewood in British Columbia out to the coast and back. So we used to perform a safety and maintenance inspection on that train at a number of locations, and CP was able to convince Transport Canada for an exemption on a number of safety and maintenance inspection rules and the number one air brake test rule because they said that we have this technology. So they ran a 6-month test. The technology proved to be 83% effective. With eyes and boots on the ground, we're 100% effective. So in order to, the exemption said it's, to improve or will ensure railway safety and is in the public interest. So it went from arguably 100% effectiveness with our rail mechanics doing the safety inspection maintenance to 83%. This has now been in place for about 18 months now. And the evidence is showing that it's declined. It's gone from 83%, it's now down into touching almost the 60% effective, that our mechanics are still going out. And the over-reliance here on WILDS, hot box detectors, coal wheel detectors, those are tools that would assist our mechanics, not replace our mechanics. CN has wayside detectors about every 12 to 15 miles. CP has them between 15 and 20 miles, and so they're the greatest thing in the world. We still have bearing failures, we still have cracked wheel failures, we still have dragging equipment failures, and all of those would be captured at a safety inspection location that most of them, for the most part, have been eliminated. And that's why we're saying we should have a safety maintenance inspection at least every 1,600 kilometers, so that we know that those cars are traveling from one distance to another in a manner that's safe. So in terms of the technology, I just say there's an over-reliance, and my fear is that there's going to be more and more and more reliance, and the railways are saying we're not going to fix cars we don't own. We're in the business of moving cars. We're not in the business of fixing them, and that's the mentality that drives this technology.
Okay, thank you. Now move to Mr. Komanicki, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. One of the previous witnesses talked about safety management systems. Obviously, there are regulations, and I know that's important, but safety management systems being sort of an augmentation of that. And the statement was made that the safety management systems in a lot of cases are yet maturing or still maturing. And I know when you look at Via Rail or CN or CP, perhaps larger operations, their safety management systems may be in a different stage. Is there a maturation process in safety management systems or not? What might that look like? And are there disparities amongst operators that needs to be looked at? Does anyone care to answer that? Perhaps Mr. Fleming?
Okay, so I think it's true that how an organization approaches safety management system develops over time, and when you go from a prescriptive regime to a goal-oriented or safety management system regime, there's often a big challenge in that transition. In terms of maturity, so in 2000 I developed a thing called the Safety Culture Maturity Model, which was to describe that process. I think it was used as part of the Railway Act review, the previous one. And the idea really is that, you know, for your safety management system to work, it needs to be supported by a mature safety culture. And as that process evolves, then your safety management system will become more effective. So at the bottom end of a safety culture, we have what we call a pathological culture, where organizations don't care about safety and it's all about getting around the rules and not following them, and that obviously is not good for safety. When we get towards the top, the companies live their systems and go beyond any requirements and rules and are very, very effective and safe. So I think what's important is to see that really it's the maturity of the culture that underpins the effectiveness of your safety management system. So many times you can have two companies that on paper have the same management system but very different outcomes, and that's because of a poor underpinning culture. And so it's the maturity of the culture that I think is important, rather than the maturity of the documentation of the system.
Fair enough, and I suppose there will be obviously variances depending where you are on that
continuum.
continuum.
Yes.
The other thing that I've been looking at is a safety management system requires buy-in not only by employers, employees, management, sort of the whole operation. And I know that there's things that you need to deal with, like there's a certain way of thinking about things, and there's a resistance to change by many of us, even when change is good. And so, you know, we've done things a certain way. We want to continue to do that. You mentioned that monitoring the performance is one thing, and looking at trends and risk assessments, but actually going to the next stage and doing something about that in terms of improvement. Is there a resistance to that, and how can you address the resistance to change that may mean improvement?
Well, if I may, I just the risk assessment deals with risk, not the hazard. So the improvement has to, from a perspective of in the workplace, and which Mr. Fleming is talking about, Professor Fleming is talking about, there's got to be, when there is a review, it's got to come back to eliminating the hazard, dealing with the hazard, as opposed to just continuing to find ways to mitigate the risk and get better at it. And people who are involved in SMS are true advocates of it, they're believers of it, and they believe they're doing a wonderful job at it. And as Professor Fleming said, there's no matter how well the documents read, it's the organization itself. So there has to be
resistance. How do you address any resistance to change for improvement, Professor?
Yeah. So different groups have resistance for different reasons. So there's a number of different strategies that can be employed. So in general, we would try to engage people in the process, and if they have control of the process, they tend to be more likely to buy into that change process. In a case where that's not working, then you may want to use external controls. So if an organization isn't buying into a process, then you may use regulatory controls to say you must do something. So sometimes you can frame it as a stick or a carrot sort of framework. So if you engage people and design the process, they're more likely to comply with it and buy into it. If that's not the case, then at a regulatory level, then you would use that process to move people along. My framework is that this is dealing with managers rather than frontline staff, is that if the person doesn't change, the person is changed. So you either get rid of the person or you get the person to change.
Yeah, and it's more a bit of a comment. I noticed the onboard voice and video recording devices being used. I know maybe you're doing a pilot on that. And I know there may be some resistance as to what it can be used for, whether it invades employee privacy or whether it can be used as a punitive measure potentially. But really, safety, I would say, trumps all of that, and there's got to be a way that you can figure to address both the privacy issues and the punitive measure issues and use it for the purposes that it's intended to be used, regardless of how invasive it may be. And of course, the legislation, the Canadian Transportation Accident Investigation Safety Board Act, says it can only be used for investigation purposes for accidents. So there's got to be a way you can work that out.
Thank you very much. We now move to Mr. Watson, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Dr. Fleming raised one valuable tool in surveying the perceptions, safety perceptions of employees as one of possibly a number of different tools to assist in safety or evaluating safety culture. Let me just ask Via, do you do surveys of your employees on how safe they feel in the environment, and how often do you do that?
If I may,
Yep.
One of the things we do is part of the Canada Labour Code occupational safety and health regulations is to have a joint national health and safety committee. So high-level union, high-level management.
No, I mean surveying grassroots members,
Correct.
not that structure.
Absolutely. I'm going to get to that, though, if I may. So we actually have two, so that we're dealing with the issues that are important to our Unifor colleagues and one that are important to our TCRC colleagues. Denis made reference that we're hosting our annual conference this week. Our unionized employees help develop the survey questions that we send out to employees across the country through the workplace committee. So we make sure
and how
they're
often
highly
do you do
involved.
those surveys? Annually?
We do them annually.
Okay, very good.
And we debrief the results together, everybody in the room.
Very good. Mr. Dias, you don't just represent VIA workers, but also workers in the CNCP environment as well? Have your members ever, on the CNCP side of it, received any kind of a survey, annual or otherwise, about how safe they feel in the environment?
Yeah, no, we do the annual surveys, but we do it every day. The preoccupation of health and safety is something that's really driven in a joint program, but it's something that's discussed every single day with our shop stewards, with our union leadership, with our membership. So this isn't an issue that is somehow takes a back seat to anything. I think VIA and our union will absolutely agree that when it comes to health and safety, there is a preoccupation and there's a hell of a lot of time spent dealing with it.
Now, you represent membership both on the passenger rail side and on the freight rail side.
Correct.
I want to come back to Dr. Fleming's measurement tool, if you will. It was used by the Independent Rail Advisory Panel in 2007 when they were measuring progress toward a safety culture. At that time, on a 5-point scale, 1 being sort of very prescriptive, rules and rules-oriented and adherence to rules, to a fully functional SMS safety culture being number 5. They had CN at 1, ranked at 1, CP at 2, and VIA at 4 out of 5. The regulator, incidentally, Transport Canada, was a 3 out of 5. But your experience with what are the differences with respect to the freight rail side that you deal with and VIA, since you give us a window into that on their safety culture? And if you don't mind keeping it reasonably brief, I do have another follow-up question.
All right, just quickly then. So CN and CP, in our view, is flipped. CP has taken a step back. They're 1. CN has advanced to 2. TC is still at 3, and VIA is at 4, and improving.
Okay. Dr. Fleming, you said earlier when questioning that leadership drives culture to a large degree. Now, as a result of S4 and pending regulations, we'll have an executive who's accountable with respect to culture, appointed and prevalent. Whistleblower protection, the union's structurally involved on the front end. in a mandatory fashion or a joint fashion about driving safety culture. But those are aspects that, in and of themselves, while they may represent accountability, don't necessarily drive safety culture, if I understand your presentation correct. Is that also true? Now, that's not to say we don't want to have them, but...
So I think that they can facilitate it, but having an accountable officer just means there's someone who's accountable. It doesn't. Right. If they don't do a particularly good job of it, then it's going to make things worse, not better.
So the exercise of this committee, if we're looking at further improvements, the improvements themselves don't necessarily. Are there any that could further facilitate safety culture? Let me ask that question first. And in this, are we sort of suggesting there may be some practical limits on the regulatory and the SMS side on driving safety culture that we just have to sort of understand as we go through this? But what can help facilitate?
Yeah, so I mean, I think that what I recommend for organizations is that they adopt a systematic approach to safety culture improvement. So it's a journey, not a destination. So the idea really is that you continually work to improve that through self-reflection and criticism. And I think that can be facilitated through external support and from a regulatory regime that recognizes that and encourages that sort of activity. I think having an expectation that organizations are actively working towards promoting a positive safety culture, I think, is important. So doing surveys is helpful. Probably what's more important from my perspective is what changes are occurring for that. What have we learned? What are we doing differently? And I think that
does external criticism work? And if so, how far should that extend?
Yeah.
Just the government? Should it be the public?
So I think that getting external input is always helpful, whether it's an external auditor or an external regulator. All of those things are helpful for organizations in terms of safety improvement. And I think what's important, though, as well, is that you have a well-resourced and well-educated regulator. I think that facilitates efficient and effective management of safety, right? A poorly educated regulator is not helpful from loads of reasons. Okay, sorry.
Thank you very much. Okay, we have we're nearing the end of the meeting, but we do have enough time for one from the NDP, the Liberal, and two here to even it out. But just forewarning, I am and have to cut everybody off at the 5-minute mark, including questions. So try and use your time accordingly. Thank you, Mr. Bai.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
We mentioned that regulation is one step, but what we need to do is look at some of the factors, some of the issue, especially and in terms of technology is also something that will help, but we have to look at the human factor. You know, two conductor, one conductor, I raised the issue, but now also what we hear about is conductor fatigue. Can you tell us a bit about it from your perspective, how important that is in terms of safety?
So we're talking about fatigue management, and clearly there's a working group involved in that now, and we're looking at the different sciences in terms of crew fatigue. And I think what's important would be to have schedules as opposed to the system where the crews are on call, and then once they're on call, then they're available for duty. And I understand the TCRC will be here in another week or so, so you'll get a little bit more information in terms of fatigue management, but it's critical to rail safety.
Maybe Villarreal?
Effectivement, tous les...
Yes, the question of fatigue is an important one, not only in terms of the number of hours spent on the train, but also in terms of the working environment of the employees. We're working with the policy committee of the DTCRC. We meet with them regularly to study this question of, well, I think that this hasn't been solved in all industries, but we have been able to study not only the number of hours the employees work, but also their working environment.
Thank you. I really only have one question. Both CNCP and MMA and Transport Canada have refused to release the entirety of the safety management systems of those corporations on the basis that they have some kind of corporate competitive advantage to keep them private and secret. That's not the case of Via Rail. So can we see your safety management systems?
Certainly. We don't have any objection to showing.
And you'll table it as part of this?
Sure, yes.
That'd be great. I do have one other question for Via Rail, and that is the other recommendation of the Transportation Safety Board out of the Burlington incident was to create survivable locomotives. Is Via Rail moving on that recommendation, or is the federal government helping you move on that recommendation?
On est à étudier
We are studying how we could do this. Our trains were recently renovated. Obviously, we believe they're very safe, and we're trying to see how we could adapt those trains to meet the standards, and also we're trying to see how quickly we can implement this. We haven't taken any concrete initiatives yet, but we are studying that very seriously. Also, during the incident with Train 92, we have to look at the context. I'm not an expert, and even the measures recommended by the Transportation Safety Board may not have minimized the loss of life because the conditions were quite particular.
The regulator needs to have all the information in order to make good rules and things like that. We know from the Auditor General that the Transport Canada is not getting the internal risk assessments conducted by railway companies. Isn't that important for us to understand what's happening and make better rules? Yeah.
So I don't necessarily know about their rules. What I was actually referring to was that, particularly when we're talking about safety culture, that the regulator needs some people internally who actually have some competence and some knowledge in that domain, and also they need the capacity. If we think safety culture is important and we think SMS is important, they need to have the capacity to deal with that.
Thank you very much. Mr. McGinney, 5 minutes.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Folks, I want to go back to the Auditor General's report, and I want to go back to the human capacity, the capacity challenges inside the department. Here's what the Auditor General says, and it's in stark contrast to some of the things I'm hearing. First, the Auditor General says in 2009, Transport Canada estimated they needed 20 system auditors to audit each railway once every 3 years. 20. Then the Auditor General says they have 10 qualified inspectors, on top of which they now have to oversee 39 additional non-federal railways. The Auditor General then says Transport Canada doesn't know whether its current staff of inspectors, get this, have the required skills and competencies to do their jobs. Then the Auditor General says inspectors and managers are not trained. Quote, inspectors and managers are not trained on a timely basis. Then the Auditor General says that Transport Canada can't even warrant that inspectors are objective and independent, that they come mainly from federal railways. So what are Canadians to make of this very detailed, brutal report on the state of rail safety? I mean, Via Rail, as I said earlier, I'd like to get a response from Via, was not audited once in 3 fiscal years, carrying 4 million passengers a year. Now, you know, I'm no fan of the Republican administration, but I like one line from the United States, which is trust, but verify. And I think at the end of the day, most Canadians believe the ultimate responsibility for rail safety is the federal government, not the partnership between the regulator and the regulated manifested in an SMS, not the regulated body, not Via Rail, not CN, not CP, not any of these other railways. I think most Canadians believe it is the responsibility of the Government of Canada to regulate and to make sure that rail is safe. So what are we to make? What are Canadians to make of this factual, objective, third-party report? Maybe start with Via Rail.
Well, we've taken this very, very seriously. We welcome any inspection that are being made on top of the audits made by Transport Canada. There's one actually going on right now. And as we mentioned earlier, we believe that inspection, audit, verification involvement from all employees is the key success factor for us, in addition to everything that's being done from the regulator. So I don't know if I answer your questions on the capacity to...
Would you say, Mr. Pinsonneau, that in the SMS structure, it's a partnership between two groups here, the regulated and the regulator. It's a partnership. Aren't you concerned that your partner isn't living up to their obligations?
I feel I work like I would be inspected every day, every week.
But you're not.
I know, but the way we work at VRL, we don't wait for inspection. We work like if we were to be inspected without any notice every week, every month.
Fair enough. Mr. Diaz?
Look, you're not going to get any disagreement with us on the role of the government as it relates to regulations, inspections. I mean, think about it. I mean, I live in Milton, and I live about 2 miles from a truck government inspection station. All sprinkled right across the country in every province is we have inspection stations. People can't drive a truck without going by an inspection station. So you're not going to have a quarrel with us as it relates to regulations, the role of government, and the desire of government to implement the regulations. So if we're talking about inspections, then there's no question. Inspections have to be done. The question becomes, how are we going to make sure that they're done? I mean, there's no question. We spend a lot of time in the railway industry as it relates to health and safety, as it relates to a preoccupation of safety. But there has to be checks and balances in every system.
Thank you.
Ms. Young, 5 minutes.
Sorry about that. Thank you very much. What I'm finding kind of interesting in this is that we have heard from different organizations, obviously. Is there a safety fund set aside for the railway system that, you know, communities also feed into? Because if they do developments across tracks and et cetera, you know, everybody needs to organize and, you know, fund their little piece of that? Or is that just kind of too pie in the sky, never going to happen? Because it sounds to me like there are some very distinct great initiatives happening, because as you can see in your charts, safety has gone down, increased, which is excellent. However, there still seems to be a number of gaps that you've identified today. Thank you very much. And I would strongly encourage each of you to go back and submit to us, because we are very serious about this study. We want to see results. We want to see suggestions, solid recommendations that we can implement. So please go back, because there's always a time, you know, problem here, you know, and submit something in writing to us, you know, to further explore, expand some of the comments you've made today. But there seems to be a real gap between the owners of the cars, the people that identify, as you were saying, Mr. Dias and Mr. Stevens, you know, some of the issues. The inspections happen, but then they're not followed up on, or because you don't own the cars, you're not going to do the actual safety or fix those cars. Like, there seems to be this kind of loose system in place, but nobody is actually, at the end of the day, fixing those cars. Or there's not enough money to fix those cars because you rent them, or you know, you're on the rail system, but you're not owning the system. And so the ties or the railroad lines themselves, and then you're going through communities who want access, and who's paying for that. So there seems to be a lot of players. So I would say to build on Mr. McGuinty's concept, that it's really not just the railroads and the unions. It's the communities, it's the owners. You know, it's taking a look at the whole infrastructure to say where are the weaknesses, where there can be improvements. Would you say that that's true?
Let me give you a correlation. I just participated in a settlement for the Port of Vancouver, where we had 180 owners. We had 1,300 non-union truckers. You had 350 unionized truckers. You had the provincial government, the federal government, and the Port of Vancouver. Now try to find a solution. Along the lines here, we're spending a lot of time talking about who owns what and who's responsible for what. if you're really looking to find a true resolve to the numerous issues, you have to take a look at how things have changed in 20 years. Because you spend a lot of time talking about the community, as you should. But you need to also understand with deregulation and privatization, a lot of the lines that went around the communities have been eliminated through contracting. So it leaves the option of going through the middle of the town. So yes, we can talk about how communities are being built around the tracks, but because of a shift from railways serving the country, serving communities, to a system based on profitability, a lot of the solutions that were in place are now not in place. So you need to look at that piece as well.
But that's just one final comment. But that's exactly my point, and that's exactly my concern, because we are sort of on this cusp of course, after, you know, I'm from Vancouver, actually, so thank you very much for helping
Not a
us
problem.
with
My
that
rental,
strike.
my service is cheap.
But the point is that we need to look at this total picture and resolve that, because the strike in itself I think, went to emphasize to Canadians across the country how important our rail systems are and how integral they are to our economy, to people's homes and lives, you know, all of that. And so please, you know, you are the experts here. Please help us with this.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're taking the last 5-minute round as well, Ms. Young.
Oh, am I? Oh, excellent. Thank you. I see some hands here, so I'm going to let you guys speak. Mr. Ryan, if you want to start.
Up on the contraction, just to top off on the contraction. So when that started back in 1995-96, and all of these rail lines got converted into walking paths, what happens then is, you know, the issue of grade separation increases because we have more trains going through these high density areas. So that automatically increases, and then the issue becomes as well, and it goes to the point where the railways weren't interested in slowing down the trains. The reason they're not interested in slowing down the trains is because now they're running longer trains through these communities, and the last thing they want is to have the communities up in arms because they're split. The fire station is on one side of the track and the fire's on the other side of the track, and they can't get across because they got a 10,000-foot train. So it all kind of melds together. So if there was anything about a risk assessment, I'm thinking about doing risk assessments in New Brunswick and those areas. The risk assessment probably should have been done in 1995 or at least in 2005 to say, what are we doing as a country here in terms of our infrastructure? That's part of the task of this committee, but in terms of infrastructure, we're not building it. We've been facilitating a system that allows abandonments and tearing down.
So, Mr. Stevens, and to all of you again, I would like to challenge you all to think a little bit more, you know, beyond SMS and all of these wonderful things that are being put in. But I think that we need to take a longer-term view at how these changes over the last 20 years has impacted the safety of our rail system, the efficiency of it today, and going forward, what we need to build or what we need to do, both as a government, but not just as a government, but as Canadians. What do we need to do together to ensure that we build a modern safety railway system to ensure our needs and keep our community safe at the same time? So please, somebody else had their hand up as well and had a comment.
No, I mean, we support what you're saying. I think, you know, VIA has developed its own vision of what it wants to be, you know, 10 years from now, 15 years from now. And there's no question that infrastructure is part of that vision. And to achieve that vision, not only do you have to make sure that you have a safe operation, but also an operation that Canadians will use. But safety is always paramount, even in those long-term visions. We can't develop them themselves alone. We need, you know, we do need help from communities, from other organizations to ensure that those safety standards are built into it, and at the same time allow us to perform, whether it's a passenger railway or a freight railway, allow us to perform in a way that we're competitive and we can do our job.
Thank you. Just one final question then. Given the complexities, as we just said, about where the rail systems are, the complexities around not just the small systems, the SMS, but, you know, throughout Canada on rail safety, Do you think that there's already currently systems in place, like some kind of national organization or national conference that all of you guys and all the stakeholders come to resolve this issue, or is there more that the federal government can do to facilitate a longer-term view at this discussion and bringing all the players together to resolve this issue so that we have a modern, efficient system?
I think there is an opportunity for that, because I think we need to get into the education system as well, so that rail safety awareness is taught at a very young age and reinforced. And you know how most high schools have community programs, volunteers? We think rail safety awareness should be something that's accepted, an Operation Lifesaver type volunteer. I know my children, you know, were out there doing things. I'd rather they're out raising awareness about safety.
So you saying, Ms. Turney, that there is no current body in place or you know, group where you all come together to discuss these bigger issues?
Not through the Railway Association of Canada. However, I don't know if it's having the impact that you're talking about. I think there's more that can be done.
Right. And there's no safety fund then in place where, you know, communities or unions or people can tap into? Because I know that we had put into place for our World Tanker Safety Program that they have to have a certain amount of insurance, and the money is there in case that there are incidents. Is that not in place for the rail system?
The only one that we've been aware of is the Transport Canada Grade Crossing and Improvement Program. So that's a way when, as a railway, we bring this to the attention of citizens in the various communities to say, listen, there's money available to you if you close a crossing or if we do these improvements. But other than that...
And is this program embedded into FCM?
Sorry, Ms. Young.
Are we out of time?
Yeah, we are out of time. And
Thank you.
So if you want to just have a quick comment to that, Ms. Tierney, go ahead. But,
no, I had finished, if that's okay.
Okay, that's fine. So,
if this program or another one like it is embedded into FCM, if they're aware of the fact that they can work with this program?
I'm not aware.
Okay.
Sorry.
We never have enough time, but I'd like very much to thank all of you for being here today and participating in our study. And at some point, the committee will have a report out of it, and your input has been very valuable. Thank you very much.